Welcome to The Explainer. If you've been tuning into financial media lately, you've almost certainly heard the victory lap, inflation is defeated, and we're gliding right into a flawless soft landing. But today, we're unpacking a highly contrarian and honestly pretty alarming perspective from the latest special service newsletter by the Macro Butler. It's titled From Fuel to Food, The Bite of Stagflation. The core argument here, what we are experiencing right now isn't the death of inflation. Not even close. It's actually the quiet, sneaky setup for a massive second wave. So let's get right into it.
The author hooks us right out of the gate with this incredibly striking philosophical analogy. They note that food inflation quietly disrupts the natural order. While economists and central bankers sit in polished boardrooms debating highly adjusted core inflation metrics, real-world food inflation arrives uninvited, muddy boots and all. It's a fantastic image, right? It has this habit of humbling both emperors and economists alike, simply because it doesn't ask for debate, it just tightens the belt.
So how exactly is this uninvited guest sneaking back in? Well, we have to pull back the curtain and look at the headline illusion versus the underlying reality.
You really have to look past the numbers we're constantly being told to celebrate. Recent CPI prints delivered exactly what the market ordered, this beautifully airbrushed headline of a 0.6% month-over-month increase. But if you peel back that layer, the reality underneath is incredibly stubborn. Core services, which make up a massive 76% of the inflation basket, have quietly accelerated to 2.48%. The newsletter points out that the market's much-desired soft landing narrative completely ignores this sticky, uncomfortable data.
That recent dip in headline inflation you might have heard about? The Macro Butler makes a compelling case that it is definitely not a victory lap. It's actually just the opening act of Inflation Wave 2. Once the delayed effects of energy shocks and looming fertilizer shortages leak into the broader economic data, economists are probably going to have to retire the word temporary for good. To really prove this point, the newsletter introduces us to a concept they call the zombie metric. They're talking about owner's equivalent rent, or OER. This is a lagging shelter indicator that quietly drains household purchasing power like a slow-moving horror movie monster, all while policymakers point to it and loudly claim that prices are cooling down.
And guess what? This zombie is shuffling right back into the spotlight. Owner's equivalent rent just reaccelerated to 3.3% year over year. The author sardonically points out that somehow this is being framed as progress, as proof that shelter inflation is, quote, under control. But think about what that actually means. It just means the zombie is limping instead of sprinting. Prices are still going up, they just aren't rising quite fast enough to cause an immediate panic on financial TV. Now consider supercore CPI. This is core services, excluding housing, basically the metric policymakers pivot to when the headline looks bad. Well, it just reaccelerated to 3.38%. The newsletter highlights that this puts us right back into October 2021 territory. Remember that era? That was when inflation was still widely being dismissed as a transitory glitch? So yeah, the whole mission accomplished narrative, it's looking drastically premature right now.
Okay, so where is the pressure really coming from? Let's trace the hidden mechanics, specifically what we call the fuel-to-food pipeline.
Rising food prices don't just happen in a vacuum, right? The author maps out how they're born from a very messy, unruly combination of inputs: unpredictable weather, ambitious politicians, diluted currencies, broken supply chains, and crucially, energy costs. The report beautifully calls this a humble rebellion of the natural order.
To really drive this home, the author uses this vivid metaphor. Modern agriculture is less a dance with nature than an alchemy of hydrocarbons into calories. Let that sink in for a second. It's a profound realization. The humble grain drinks just as much from the oil well as it does from the rain. Fertilizers are synthesized from natural gas, tractors burn diesel, and our global shipping networks rely entirely on fossil fuels.
Because of that hydrocarbon alchemy, there is a fascinating yet dangerous time delay. When oil prices spike, UN food prices quietly follow with a 3 to 6 month lag. The agricultural fields absorb that initial energy shock, but eventually, those costs show up at your local supermarket uninvited. When energy gets expensive, the entire food chain simply sends the tab downstream, directly to you, the consumer.
Which brings us to the broader economic consequence of all this, the stagflation reality.
The newsletter defines stagflation very precisely. It's an economic environment where prices persistently rise and your purchasing power falls, all while economic activity and growth quietly shrink. To put it as simply as possible, you're paying more, but you're getting less.
To put the sheer danger of this into historical context, the author compares the deflation of the 1930s with the stagflation of the 1970s and today.
In the 30s, prices collapsed and GDP tanked. But the newsletter argues that stagflation is actually much crueler. Why? Because prices surge. Your nominal wages might go up, giving you the illusion of making more, but your wallet feels noticeably poorer, and economic activity shrinks anyway. You are just relentlessly squeezed from both sides.
And the author makes a grim but absolutely vital observation about the real-world impact of this squeeze. Food inflation doesn't just alter economic spreadsheets, it acts as a highly predictable catalyst for social unrest. It hits lower-income households the hardest, functioning as a brutal survival tax. The newsletter notes that when the cost of simply staying alive spikes, public confidence collapses, regime risk increases, and economic inflation rapidly mutates into social frustration.
So, what are the actual odds we dodge this and miraculously return to the Federal Reserve's target? The newsletter reveals some truly sobering math here. To actually hit the 2% CPI target by the end of 2026, monthly inflation prints would basically need to hover around exactly 0.0% from here on out. Given the geopolitical conflicts and energy shocks we've literally just covered, the author totally dismisses this possibility as sheer spreadsheet hopium.
So if the math doesn't support a soft landing, what's the move? Let's open up the Investor Playbook.
The newsletter offers some very specific strategic recommendations for building an anti-fragile portfolio to survive this squeeze. First up, avoid long-dated government bonds entirely. Second, favor low-leverage, cash-generating companies, specifically energy producers, because they actually benefit from these shocks. Third, they propose a really significant allocation, up to 50%, to gold, silver, and hard commodities. And finally, just brace yourself for much higher volatility ahead.
This analysis provides a completely different and very sobering lens through which to view our current market data. If you want to dive deeper into these contrarian macroeconomic perspectives and actually apply them to your own wealth strategies, you really should read the full reports. You can contact them directly by emailing info@themacrobutler.com and definitely visit their website at https://themacrobutler.com for more of these incredible deep dive insights.
So the absolutely crucial point we are left to ponder is this. If the official narrative is an illusion, and the uninvited guest of food and energy inflation is about to arrive, muddy boots and all, as inflation wave 2 approaches, is your portfolio prepared to pay the tab? Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and we'll see you next time.